May I have this dance?
I'm afraid I must decline.
Cheryl never liked galas. The sparkling lights, the endless chatter, and the parade of people vying for attention always left her exhausted. But when her vivacious girlfriend Angela had insisted, "Come on, Cheryl, just one night out. Live a little," she had reluctantly agreed. After all, a night away from boardroom meetings and endless schedules running her transport company was not entirely unwelcome. That night, the grand ballroom of the Mayfair Hotel was alive with elegance and glittering gowns. Cheryl, dressed in a sleek black gown that hugged her curves and framed her long curly hair, cascading down her shoulders, moved quietly through the crowd, preferring the edges to the center. Angela, ever the social butterfly, was already laughing and twirling with a group of admirers. And then she saw him, Duang. The name was whispered even before it reached her ears. The elusive Korean billionaire whose companies spanned London, known as much for his intellect as his breathtaking good looks. He stood across the room, leaning slightly against a pillar, calm and composed amid the swirl of opulence around him. His sharp eyes seemed to scan the room, yet when they met hers, Cheryl felt an unexpected jolt, a pull she couldn't ignore. Compelled by a force she didn't understand, she walked toward him, the music swelling as if urging her forward. "May I have this dance?" she asked, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. Duang's gaze softened for a brief moment, then a faint, polite smile curved his lips. "I'm afraid I must decline," he said quietly, his tone firm but not unkind. Cheryl blinked, slightly taken aback, but she didn't step back. Instead, she found herself unable to look away from him, drawn to the enigmatic calm he radiated. That night, as she returned to her penthouse in Tottenham, she found herself restless, replaying the moment over and over. She knew, strangely and frighteningly, that she was already falling for him. The next morning, Cheryl's private life collided with her unstoppable ambition. She called her secretary with a simple instruction: find everything you can about Duang. By afternoon, she had more than she bargained for. His family remained in Korea, deeply private, leaving only his sister to manage one of his London offices. And as fate or some mischievous universe would have it, Duang was looking for a personal assistant. Cheryl's mind raced. The idea was audacious, perhaps even absurd, but she couldn't resist. She called Angela, her voice a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Guess who's hiring a personal assistant?" Cheryl asked. Angela, who thrived on chaos and romantic mischief, practically squealed down the phone. "Cheryl, go get that man. Apply. This is literally your chance." And so, Cheryl did the unthinkable. She crafted a subtle disguise, not to hide her beauty, but to appear as a competent, unassuming candidate. She applied, submitted her resume, and waited. When Duang's secretary called to schedule an interview, Cheryl's heart leapt. London's gray skies didn't seem so dull that day. They were full of possibility. Little did she know, stepping into his office would mark the beginning of a dance far more intricate and intoxicating than any ballroom waltz. A dance of ambition, wit, and a slowly kindling desire that neither could deny. Duang sat behind the sleek mahogany desk of his London office, the city lights twinkling faintly through the floor-to-ceiling windows. His mind, usually razor-sharp and unflinching, was preoccupied. Normally, he would have brushed off distractions. Emotions were inefficiencies he could ill afford. Yet, tonight, one particular memory refused to fade. A soft voice had asked him for a dance at the gala last night. Soft, confident, yet undeniably compelling. He couldn't remember the face. It had been buried in the blur of sparkling gowns and polished shoes, but the voice lingered in his thoughts, insistent and oddly comforting. Duang frowned, pressing a hand to his temple. He had been in a foul mood that evening, the result of a disastrous business deal finalized just hours before the gala. partner had tried to manipulate figures in one of his London companies, and Duang had caught it only at the last minute. The stress, the frustration, it had tainted everything. Even the gala with its glittering opulence and polite smiles had seemed dull. He remembered the moment clearly. A polite smile, a refusal, and then a polite withdrawal. He had not looked at her face properly, had not spared her the glance she deserved, and yet he regretted it. For the first time in a long while, Duang acknowledged the small ache of curiosity, a subtle longing that he hated to admit. There was something in that voice, that presence, that had struck him deeper than any deal or calculated encounter ever could. Shaking off the thought, he turned back to the stack of documents demanding his attention. Yet, even the crisp pages and sharp numbers failed to erase the memory. He caught himself imagining her eyes meeting his, her smile bold enough to challenge his stubborn reserve. Little did he know, fate was about to intervene. The phone on his desk rang, cutting through his reverie. His secretary's voice was brisk and professional. "Mr. Duang, your interview for the personal assistant position is in 10 minutes. Candidate has just arrived." Duang's brow furrowed slightly, curiosity prickling at the edges of his composure. He didn't usually concern himself with assistants beyond their ability to manage schedules and handle menial tasks efficiently. But something, perhaps intuition, perhaps destiny, told him this one would be different. When the door opened and a woman stepped in, confident yet modest, he froze for a heartbeat. She carried herself with the kind of poise that didn't demand attention but naturally drew it. She was poised, professional, dressed in a simple outfit that suggested both competence and confidence. Her hair, softly styled, framed her face with natural grace, and there was a quiet determination in her eyes that immediately commanded respect. "Good morning, Mr. Duang," she said, her voice calm, professional, but laced with a subtle warmth. "I'm here for the personal assistant interview." Duang nodded, gesturing for her to sit. He noticed the way she held herself, the slight tilt of her head, and the calm assurance she radiated, but something about her was unfamiliar. Strange, considering his sharp memory for faces. But no matter how hard he tried, he could not place her. "Take a seat," he said smoothly, masking any curiosity. He had a reputation to maintain. "I trust your journey here was uneventful." "Very well, thank you," she replied, settling into the chair across from him. As he reviewed her resume, Duang found himself noting details with practiced precision. The breadth of her experience, her sharp management skills, and her capability to handle high-pressure situations. She seemed ideal, professional, efficient, everything an assistant should be. Yet, as he looked at her, he felt a flicker of something he couldn't identify, a subtle pull and almost imperceptible curiosity. It made no sense, he had no reason to be intrigued, and certainly he could not place her voice. For her part, Cheryl was acutely aware of him. The man in front of her, poised, powerful, magnetic, was every bit as alluring as she had imagined. She kept her composure, masking the rapid beating of her heart. Every instinct screamed that she should reveal herself, but she couldn't risk it. The interview progressed smoothly. Duang asked questions, testing her problem-solving skills and her ability to handle complex schedules. Cheryl responded with precision, subtly weaving in enough charm to keep him attentive without giving away her true identity. When it was over, Duang leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "You are impressive," he said finally. "I will need to consider my decision, but your credentials are certainly strong." Cheryl smiled politely, hiding the thrill coursing through her veins. "Thank you, Mr. Duang. Appreciate the opportunity." As she left the office, she couldn't help but glance back at him, her pulse quickening. He remained seated, focused, unreadable, and completely unaware that the woman walking away was the very same one who had asked him for a dance at the gala. And Duang would spend the rest of the day unknowingly haunted by a subtle, unplaceable feeling a sense that something important had just crossed his path. The morning sunlight spilled across the living room of the Tottenham estate as Cheryl stood by, the window phone in hand. She had rehearsed this conversation in her mind countless times, but no matter how prepared she felt, telling her mother and sister about her new plans still made her stomach flutter. Her mother, a woman of sharp intellect and unwavering standards, answered the phone briskly. "Cheryl, darling, how are you this morning?" she asked. "Good, Mum," Cheryl replied, taking a deep breath. "I wanted to tell you, I'm starting a new job. It's a personal assistant position at a company here in London." There was a long pause on the line. Cheryl could almost hear her mother's mind racing. "A new job," her mother finally said, her voice tight. "Cheryl, are you out of your mind? You run your transport company. Why would you take a job under someone else?" Cheryl felt the familiar weight of her mother's concern but stood her ground. "It's temporary, Mom. I want to gain some experience in a different environment, and it's a position I think I can manage without disrupting my company. I'll still oversee everything here. She hesitated. "I need a change, Mum." Her mother's sharp tone softened slightly but remained firm. "Very well, but until you come back full-time, your sister will be in charge of the company. Do not let anything slip while you're away. Understand?" "Yes, Mum. I'll make sure everything runs smoothly," Cheryl assured her. After ending the call, she quickly dialed Angela, eager for someone to share her excitement. Without the lecture, Angela picked up almost instantly, her usual energy spilling into the conversation. "Cheryl, tell me you've got him," Angela exclaimed before Cheryl could even speak. Cheryl laughed, shaking her head. "Not yet, Angela, but I'm starting at his company as a personal assistant. I'll be close working right there." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a shriek of delight. "Oh my God, this is perfect. You are literally going to be rubbing elbows with your crush every day. This is insane." "Cheryl." Cheryl smiled, feeling a mix of thrill and nerves. "I know. I have to be careful. I don't want him to recognize me or suspect anything. This has to stay professional." Angela was relentless, as always. "Professional schmfessional. Just remember to enjoy it. Watch him, learn him, get to know him. And Cheryl, if anything happens, you better call me immediately." Cheryl laughed again, feeling the tension ease slightly. She hung up and looked out the window, London's skyline stretching endlessly before her. This was it, the beginning of something daring, risky, and intoxicating. She would step into Duang's world, close enough to study him, but careful enough to hide her heart. And somewhere deep down, she knew that this temporary position might change everything. Cheryl took a deep breath as she walked through the polished glass doors of Duang's London office. The building itself was a testament to modern luxury. Sleek lines, muted lighting, and a quiet hum of efficiency. She adjusted her blazer, reminding herself that she was here on business, not on a romantic quest. Her first challenge came almost immediately, finding the receptionist. The front desk was minimalist, with a single woman typing furiously on a keyboard. "Good morning," Cheryl said, her tone professional yet warm. "I'm Cheryl, here for the personal assistant interview today, for my first day." The receptionist looked up, studied her briefly, and nodded. "Of course, Mr. Duang will see you shortly. Please wait here." Cheryl's heart skipped slightly as she settled into the sleek leather chair. Around her, the office buzzed with energy, executives moving briskly, phones ringing, keyboards clicking. She couldn't help but notice the meticulous precision of the space, a reflection of the man who ran it. Minutes later, the door to Duang's office opened. He stepped out briefly, scanning the floor as if he had sensed her presence from the shadows. Cheryl looked up, heart beating faster than she'd like to admit, and gave a polite nod. "Cheryl?" he asked, his tone neutral. His eyes, sharp and assessing, studied her carefully. There was no recognition, no hint that he had heard her voice at the gala. Yet something about her presence intrigued him, though he couldn't explain why. "Yes, sir," she replied smoothly. He gestured toward his office. "Follow me. I'll show you where you'll be working and introduce you to the team." Inside his office, Cheryl noticed the same calm authority she had glimpsed during her interview. Duang moved efficiently, introducing her to department heads and assistants, explaining the company structure and outlining expectations. He spoke clearly, concisely, leaving no room for confusion. Cheryl listened attentively, absorbing every detail, every nuance. She noticed the way he maintained a quiet control over the room, commanding respect without ever raising his voice. She had seen powerful men before, but there was a magnetic precision in him that made even routine instructions feel significant. Over the next few hours, Cheryl settled into her role. She organized schedules, answered emails, and arranged meetings. All the while, she kept an eye on Duang, careful to study him from a professional distance. Every glance, every gesture was a lesson in understanding him, how he handled stress, how he interacted with his staff, how he exuded authority effortlessly. At lunch, Angela called, sensing the excitement in Cheryl's voice even through the brief conversation. "So, how is he?" Angela asked, practically vibrating with energy. Cheryl smiled, glancing at the office door where Duang had just passed. "He's impressive. Everything about him is precise, controlled. He doesn't waste time, and people clearly respect him. I need to figure out a way to get closer without blowing my cover." Angela squealed on the other end. "Cheryl, this is perfect. Observe, learn, play it cool, and when the time is right, swoop in." Cheryl laughed quietly. "One step at a time, Angela. One step at a time." As she hung up and returned to her tasks, she felt a thrill running through her veins. She was here, closer than ever to Duang, navigating the world he controlled so effortlessly. She had to be careful, patient, and clever. But deep down, she knew that this proximity could change everything if she dared to let it. The office hummed with quiet activity as Cheryl moved through her tasks, keeping her focus sharp. She had quickly learned the rhythm of Duyang's workday. Meticulous, calculated, and demanding. Every detail mattered, and every decision was precise. Duang, meanwhile, observed from his office with his usual calm intensity. He hadn't yet placed hadn't recognized the soft, confident voice he vaguely remembered from the gala. But there was something about her, a poise, a quiet assurance, that tugged at his attention, even as he told himself it was merely professional curiosity. Cheryl was arranging a series of meetings for him when she noticed a minor scheduling conflict. One of the clients was double-booked, and if it wasn't handled quickly, it could cause a major disruption. "Excuse me, Mr. Duang," she said, stepping lightly into his office. "There's a conflict with the 3 o'clock meeting. If we move the marketing briefing to 3:30, it would free up your schedule without affecting the client." Duang looked up from his laptop, studying her for a moment. The way she spoke was calm and confident, yet polite, never presumptuous. He nodded slightly. "Good thinking, Cheryl," he said, his voice measured but with the faintest trace of approval. "Make the adjustment." Her heart skipped, though she kept her expression neutral. She executed the change efficiently, but inside, she was thrilled. He had acknowledged her judgment. Later in the afternoon, Cheryl brought him a document he had requested. She leaned over, slightly, handing it to him, and he caught a subtle scent of her perfume, a light, floral note that seemed to linger in the air longer than it should. "Thank you," he said, his eyes flicking to hers for a brief moment. There was nothing unusual in his tone, yet something about the fleeting glance made her pulse quicken. Throughout the day, small moments like this continued. A shared smile over a scheduling mishap, a brief nod of appreciation when she anticipated his needs before he even spoke, and a subtle laugh at a minor office mishap that lightened the otherwise tense environment. Each interaction was fleeting, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but to Cheryl each moment was electric. By the time the workday ended, Cheryl was exhausted but exhilarated. She had navigated her first day flawlessly, gaining small victories that brought her closer to Duang without revealing her secret. As she left the office, Angela's voice rang in her mind. Observe, learn, play it cool, and when the time is right, swoop in. Cheryl couldn't help but smile. One day at a time, one small spark at a time, and somewhere, in the midst of schedules, meetings, and office politics, a deeper connection was beginning to flicker, a connection that neither of them fully understood yet. The office was quieter than usual that afternoon. The hum of keyboards softened as employees wrapped up their tasks. Cheryl remained at her desk, reviewing documents for the next day, but she couldn't ignore the faint pull of curiosity that drew her attention toward Duang's office. She had watched him all day, controlled, composed, flawless. But now, alone in his office, he allowed himself a rare moment of vulnerability. A knock on the door startled her. "Sir, the financial reports you requested." "Ah, yes," he said, cutting her off gently. "Leave them on my desk." Cheryl stepped back, giving him space, but she noticed something unusual. He wasn't checking emails or rearranging schedules. Instead, he stared at a small framed photograph on his desk. A younger boy and girl, smiling under the sun in a field. His fingers traced the edge of the frame almost absent-mindedly. Curiosity and compassion mingled in Cheryl's chest. She had never seen this side of him. The private, almost tender side hidden behind the polished, authoritative exterior. It reminded her that beneath the billionaire persona was a man with memories, feelings, and perhaps longing. Duang glanced up suddenly, as if sensing her gaze, and Cheryl quickly looked away, pretending to organize papers. Yet the moment lingered in both of their minds, unspoken and fragile. Later, as he walked past her desk to leave for a meeting, his gaze lingered slightly, not in recognition but with subtle intrigue. Cheryl's heart raced, though she maintained a professional calm. Every glance, every movement, every detail of him was another piece of the puzzle she was determined to understand. When the office emptied and she finally stepped outside into the crisp London air, Cheryl couldn't stop smiling. Today had been more than successful, it had been enlightening. She had glimpsed the man behind the legend, the one who commanded respect effortlessly but still carried the weight of private life behind his composed exterior. That evening, she called Angela, barely able to contain her excitement. "You'll never guess," Cheryl said breathlessly. He's not just the brilliant, untouchable CEO I imagined. There's more to him. Today I saw a side of him that no one else would see. It's captivating." Angela squealed on the other end, practically bouncing. "I told you. I knew working there would get you closer. And now you're seeing him as a person. Cheryl, be careful. Don't fall too fast." Cheryl laughed, leaning against her window, watching the London skyline glitter in the night. "Falling isn't something I can control," she whispered to herself. And somewhere across the city, Duang left the office, unaware that the woman he would soon notice was already walking the corridors of his life, carefully and deliberately stepping closer, one subtle move at a time. The office had emptied hours ago. The rhythmic hum of the city outside replaced the earlier buzz of keyboards and chatter, leaving only the soft glow of desk lamps and the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. Cheryl sat at her desk, meticulously reviewing a stack of reports, while Duang worked quietly at his own, his sharp mind focused on a series of strategic proposals. For the first time since she started, Cheryl realized they were alone, just the two of them in the vast, silent office. The intimacy of the quiet, paired with the soft city lights spilling through the windows, made her heart beat faster than it should have. "Cheryl," Duang said suddenly, his voice low, cutting through the quiet without any Harshness. I noticed your notes on the East London Transport Initiative. Very thorough. Appreciate your attention to detail. Cheryl looked up, startled that he had spoken directly to her. She composed herself quickly, keeping her tone calm and professional. Thank you, sir. I wanted to make sure every potential issue was covered before finalizing the plan. He leaned back slightly, studying her. Most people wouldn't take the time to notice the small risks. It's refreshing. Cheryl felt a blush creeping up her neck but kept her posture steady. I believe small details make a big difference, she said, carefully choosing her words, especially in work that affects so many people. There was a pause, and then he gave a faint smile, the kind that was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet somehow magnetic. You have a sharp mind, he admitted, and I like that. Not many people around here can anticipate issues before I even mention them. Cheryl's pulse quickened, but she kept her composure. She had spent the entire day observing him, and now she was seeing a side she hadn't expected. Appreciative, slightly relaxed, almost human in a way the boardroom persona never revealed. As they worked, their conversation shifted seamlessly from reports to strategy to small, casual observations about the office. Every glance, every shared comment felt charged with a subtle tension neither acknowledged aloud. At one point, Cheryl reached for a file across the desk, and their hands brushed. She felt a spark, small, electric, undeniable, but neither spoke of it. London looks different at night, doesn't it? Duang said softly, glancing out the window. His tone wasn't casual. There was a quiet fascination there, a rare pause in his constant command. Cheryl nodded, her eyes meeting his briefly. It does. There's a calmness you don't see during the day. Duang's gaze lingered for just a heartbeat longer than necessary before returning to his work. But Cheryl noticed, and she felt a thrill she couldn't hide, even if she tried. Hours passed unnoticed. When Cheryl finally stood to leave, Duang's eyes met hers. You've done good work tonight, he said, voice calm but carrying an almost imperceptible warmth. Thank you, sir, she replied, her voice steady though her heart was racing. I'll see you tomorrow. As she walked to the elevator, Cheryl couldn't help but glance back. Duang had returned to his desk, focused once again. But she knew something subtle had shifted, a quiet acknowledgement, a spark of intrigue that neither would admit yet. And somewhere deep inside, she realized that tonight had been the first time they truly noticed each other, not just as employer and assistant, but as two people cautiously circling the edges of something more. The warm amber glow of the bar reflected off the polished glasses as Duang leaned back in his chair, swirling the whiskey in his glass thoughtfully. The office had been long and taxing, and he needed the quiet, the company of someone who could listen without judgment. His younger brother, Minjun, sat across from him, observing quietly before speaking. You've been distracted lately? Minjun said, raising an eyebrow. More than usual, I mean, business is running smoothly. So why do you look unsettled? Duang took a slow sip of his drink, letting the burn settle before answering. It's nothing serious, he said at first, but Minjun's knowing gaze silenced the deflection. Last night I had someone in the office, a new assistant. She's competent, sharp, efficient. But there's something about her. I can't place it, but she's different from anyone else I've ever worked with. Minjun leaned back, smirking. Different, huh? Sounds like you're trying not to admit that she caught your attention. Duang's jaw tightened slightly, though he didn't look away. I don't even know her properly. Seen her work, yes, and she handles tasks well. But there's a subtle presence. Something in the way she carries herself, how she thinks, how she anticipates problems before I even mention them. It's intriguing. Minjun laughed softly, shaking his head. Ah, little brother, that's what you get for not noticing things sooner. Competence wrapped in charm tends to do that to you, and you've always been too focused on control to admit curiosity. Duang allowed a brief smile, appreciating Minjun's insight. Yes, but it's more than that. Hard to explain. She's unlike anyone I've met before, and yet, I can't put a face to the feeling. Can't even place her voice. But something about her lingers in my mind, despite myself. Minjun raised his glass. Sounds like you're being haunted by a ghost you can't see yet. Call that infatuation. Duyung's lips twitched in the faintest of smiles, but he didn't respond. The word felt foreign, uncomfortable yet not unpleasant. He swirled his drink again, letting the whiskey burn chase, the unfamiliar warmth stirring in his chest. After a long pause, Minjun leaned forward, teasing lightly. You know, you could always get to know her better, observe her, spend time with her. I'm just saying, sometimes the answers are closer than you think. Duang didn't answer immediately. He stared into his glass, the city lights outside the bar, reflecting like tiny, distant stars. He couldn't deny it, he was intrigued, and perhaps more than he wanted to admit. Yet something told him this was not going to be simple. As the night deepened and the last few patrons left the bar, Duang finished his whiskey and stood. He had decisions to make, plans to solidify, but in the back of his mind a quiet curiosity lingered. She was on his mind in a way no assistant ever had been. And somewhere he knew, even if he didn't realize it yet, that the woman he hadn't noticed at the gala, the one quietly working beside him, was about to change more than just his office routine. Cheryl stepped out of her sleek black car into the familiar courtyard of Swift Logistics Transport Company, the crisp autumn air brushing against her face. Today she was dressed elegantly, an understated, tailored dress that reflected both her professionalism and the quiet confidence she carried. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she entered, the staff greeting her with polite smiles and respectful nods. She had received a few messages from Chloe, informing her of minor operational issues that had cropped up in her absence. Cheryl's mind, always alert, quickly shifted into problem-solving mode. She walked through the office, addressing the concerns efficiently, offering clear instructions, and reassuring her employees that everything would continue to run smoothly. Chloe approached her as she finished reviewing the last of the reports. "You're still amazing at this," Chloe said with a half-smile. "Even after all these years, you just step in and everything clicks." Cheryl returned the smile, though her thoughts were elsewhere. "I need to make sure everything is in order," she replied, her tone calm, almost distracted. "I can't afford to leave anything unresolved while I'm away." Chloe studied her, sensing the subtle shift in her mood. "Is it Duang?" she asked gently, raising an eyebrow. Cheryl froze for a heartbeat, caught off guard. "How did you know?" Chloe smiled knowingly. "You've been different lately. You're excited, distracted, and yet, somehow happy. I know that look." Cheryl let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head. "It's complicated, Chloe. I barely know him, yet I can't stop thinking about him. There's something about the way he carries himself, the way he sees things, and..." She paused, struggling to articulate the feelings that had been growing inside her. "It's irrational. I know I shouldn't feel this way, but I do." Chloe stepped closer, resting a reassuring hand on her sister's arm. "Cheryl, it's not irrational. To feel something for someone who intrigues you, who challenges you, who makes your heart race a little. You've always been careful, private, but maybe it's time to let yourself experience it, even a little." Cheryl smiled softly, feeling the comfort of her sister's understanding. "I'm just worried. He doesn't even know I exist beyond the office. I can't let him find out too soon, or I risk everything. My company, my life here, my heart." Chloe chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Cheryl, love is never without risk. But it seems to me, you're already halfway there." Cheryl laughed quietly, glancing around her office, the familiar walls filled with memories of her hard work and success. "Maybe, but I'll take it one careful step at a time." With her company affairs sorted and her heart quietly stirred, Cheryl left the office, her mind drifting back to the elegant, enigmatic man in London whose presence was starting to fill her thoughts in ways she hadn't anticipated. Tonight, she knew, would be another night of careful observation, quiet longing, and the delicate balance of desire and discretion. The office was dimly lit, the last of the city lights spilling through the tall windows. Most of the staff had left hours ago, leaving only Cheryl and Duang immersed in their work. Cheryl sat at her desk, reviewing schedules and documents, her elegant presence illuminated by the soft glow of the desk lamp. Duang had returned to his office after a brief meeting, but something in the quiet pulled him out of his routine. He found himself glancing across the room, and there she was, focused, poised, effortlessly commanding attention without trying. For the first time, he allowed himself to really look at her. Not just as an assistant, not just as someone competent, but as her. The curve of her cheek catching the light, the way her curls fell over her shoulder, the slight furrow of concentration on her brow, it made him pause. He took a step closer, and an almost imperceptible pull drew him toward her. His hand hovered over the edge of her desk, almost touching her arm before he recoiled, mentally chastising himself. Focus, he reminded himself. She's an assistant. Yet the magnetism between them was undeniable. He found himself captivated by the subtle grace of her movements, the intelligence that radiated from her every gesture, and the quiet confidence that seemed to make the air around her hum. Cheryl, oblivious to his near touch, glanced up briefly and noticed him standing there. She froze for a heartbeat under the weight of his gaze. It was intense, searching, and yet unreadable, a look that sent warmth and something else deeper through her chest. She quickly returned to her work, trying to hide the rush of emotions threatening to betray her. Duang, meanwhile, stepped back slightly, clearing his throat and returning to his papers. Yet, his thoughts lingered on her. He couldn't explain why one glance had unsettled him so thoroughly, why the idea of touching her, however briefly, had sparked a tension he had not felt in years. The room remained quiet, filled only with the soft rustle of papers and the occasional click of a keyboard. But in that silence, something unspoken had shifted. Connection, fragile, electric, and dangerous, was forming, threading between them without words. Cheryl glanced once more at him before standing to leave. Their eyes met briefly again, and, for a split second, the world outside the office ceased to exist. Then she turned and walked toward the elevator, her heart racing, leaving Duang to wonder why he couldn't stop thinking about her even after she was gone. The morning sunlight filtered through the office blinds, casting long, sharp lines across the polished floor. Duang stood by his window, coffee in hand, reviewing the day's schedule. But his mind was not on meetings or reports. It was on her, Cheryl. He couldn't stop replaying the previous evening in his head, the way she had been focused yet graceful, the subtle confidence she carried, and that almost imperceptible charm that drew his attention in ways he could not fully rationalize. He caught himself recalling the brief moment when his hand had hovered near her desk, the warmth and tension that had sparked in that instant. Focus, he reminded himself again, though his resolve wavered. As he returned to his desk, his eyes swept the office floor. Cheryl was already at her desk, papers neatly stacked, typing with effortless precision. But it wasn't her work that captured his attention this time. It was the small details, the way she tilted her head when concentrating, the faint smile she gave when something satisfied her, the subtle elegance in her movements that seemed to belong to a world entirely her own. He found himself lingering in thought, analyzing why she had such an effect on him. There was no obvious answer. She was his assistant, professional, competent, and yet unlike anyone else in his carefully controlled world. Meanwhile, Cheryl worked with practiced focus, her mind juggling the company's needs, her responsibilities, and the delicate act of remaining invisible while observing him. She noticed, from the corner of her eye, that he seemed different, more aware, more contemplative, as if the office itself had subtly shifted around her presence. "Mr. Duang," she said, stepping into his office with a stack of revised documents. Her voice was calm, neutral, professional. "I've adjusted the schedule for the marketing team based on the updated reports. Everything should align with your availability now." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers for a fraction longer than necessary. There was an intensity there, a curiosity he could not hide, though he carefully masked it behind his usual composure. "I see," he said slowly. "You anticipated everything, before I even mentioned it. Efficient and thoughtful." Cheryl smiled politely, keeping her tone even. "I try to cover all potential issues, sir." He nodded, but his gaze lingered, tracing the outline of her face, the way she carried herself. "You're different from anyone I've worked with," he admitted quietly, almost to himself. Cheryl felt a small, quiet thrill but maintained her composure, bowing slightly before leaving the room. Her heart raced, but she kept her emotions in check. Every glance, every word, every subtle interaction was a step closer, yet carefully measured, carefully hidden. As the day unfolded, both of them continued their dance of observation and restraint. He noticed her uniqueness without understanding why, and she drew closer without revealing her heart. And somewhere in the quiet corridors of the office, a delicate tension built, a tension neither of them fully understood yet, but one that promised to grow with every passing day. The office had emptied once again, the hum of the city outside mingling with the quiet tapping of keyboards. Cheryl was finishing the day's reports, her mind balancing focus and the ever-present awareness of Duang's proximity. He emerged from his office quietly, holding a folder, and stopped near her desk. His presence, calm yet magnetic, drew her attention immediately. "Cheryl," he said, his voice steady but carrying a subtle warmth she had not noticed before. She looked up, meeting his sharp, observant gaze. "Yes, sir?" she replied, keeping her tone professional, though her heart betrayed a flutter of anticipation. He paused for a moment, as if weighing his words, and then spoke deliberately. "I would like to take you to dinner tonight, outside of the office, somewhere quieter, where we can talk." Cheryl blinked, momentarily stunned. Her mind raced, but she quickly regained her composure. "Dinner? With me?" she asked, her voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "Yes," he said, his expression unreadable yet earnest. "I want to understand the person behind the efficiency, the one who anticipates and handles every detail flawlessly. I want to talk without the usual distractions of the office." Cheryl felt a thrill of excitement and nerves all at once. She had spent days observing him, careful and hidden, and now he was extending an invitation, a deliberate opportunity to get closer. Carefully, she nodded. "I'd be glad to join you," she said, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. He gave a faint, approving nod. "Very well. 7 o'clock. I'll have the details sent to you." As he walked back to his office, Cheryl let out a quiet breath, her mind a swirl of anticipation. Her secret crush, her careful plans, and her hidden feelings were now taking a daring turn. Tonight, she would be more than just an assistant. She would be stepping into his world in a way that could change everything. Alone at her desk, she allowed herself a small smile. The risk was higher now, but so was the thrill. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that this dinner would mark the beginning of something far more complicated and far more irresistible than either of them could yet predict. Thank you for tuning in to episode 1 of this story. Your time, your comments, and your encouragement keep this channel going. I can't wait to share the next episode with you.